go ahead and start. And my name is Kathy Conway. I'm a SOCAN Co-facilitator, and beside me is Alan Journet, the other co-facilitator. And I'm going to do the beginning part this evening, and then I'll introduce our speakers. So just a few things we'd like to encourage you to do. If you would please mute yourself. And then if you put your questions in the chat when we have time, and we'll stop a couple times for questions, I'll read those to the people doing the presentation. And if you're not aware of it, there are screen options. So if you go in the upper right-hand corner and select view, then you have a couple choices that you can select depending on your preferences. I'd like to pause for a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that most of us are on today, the Takelma, the Shasta, the Klamath, and the Modoc, and pay our respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. So the format for tonight is to have the information on legislative session, and then we'll stop for a few minutes of Q&A on that part, and then the information on Oregon Climate Action Plan, followed by questions on that part. And at the end, I'll share some of the activities that SOCAN and other groups are doing that we're aware of. At the end, we'll talk about actions that can be taken, and we'll have more detail later on, but the actions are listed at socan.eco/action if you're interested in that. So the topic tonight is addressing the climate crisis in Oregon, 2022 legislative, and also the Ocap progress. And doing the presentation tonight are Hogan Sherrow and Alan Journet. And since SOCAN began, one of the areas that has been most active is the legislation, interest in legislation. So tonight, we're going to have an opportunity to hear what happened in the 2022 legislative session, and also what's happened with the Oregon Climate Action Plan. So the presentation is by Alan, who is SOCAN Co-facilitator, president of the board, and also on the ROCPAC Board of Directors. Excuse me, steering committee, I've been corrected. Hogan Sherrow is the director of ROCPAC, also serves on the board of directors for SOCAN, and both Hogan and Alan are the co-leaders of the federal state project under the government group of SOCAN. So at this time, I'll pass it to Alan to start the presentation.
Okay, thanks very much, Kathy. I'd like to, if I could, right before I start, take a moment. Could we have a moment of solidarity with the folks in Ukraine and Russia who are suffering as a consequence of Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine? Thanks very much indeed. It's awful to have to do that. I'm going to start the ball rolling with legislative updates. What you're looking at is an image of a lobby day from, gosh, years ago when we actually went to Salem to demonstrate for legislation. The first part, the way Hogan and I have divided this up is we're going to look at the legislation in four headings. The first one is climate action. The first bill I want to introduce to you is Senate Bill 1518, which was introduced as an effort to modify the REACH codes. And if you don't know what REACH codes are, you are quite well forgiven. I didn't until I got into this. REACH codes are what the state offers as an improvement, as a more rigorous set of building codes than the basic building codes. And they have REACH codes, which jurisdictions, counties and cities can then employ, which are more rigorous than the basic building codes. That's how it was introduced. Unfortunately, the builders unions in Oregon pushed back so effectively that rather than pass an actual modified set of REACH codes, the bill was modified to be establishing a task force to look at building codes. And that has been modified as the Resilient Buildings Task Force. Representative Pam Marsh from House District 5 is the co-chair of that task force. And since she's such a massive climate and environmental champion, it augurs well for the action of that task force. What we'll be doing as we go through these is not dwelling on, but pointing out who from the Southern Oregon area, who are our champions in supporting items of legislation in which we're interested, and who the local legislators are who are opposing or who voted against the legislation, just so you know who our friends are and who our not so good friends are. Senate Bill 1519 was a bill that grants property tax exemption for that portion of a community solar project which is owned by residential customers or leased by residential subscribers. And this bill actually allows folks who are going to invest in community solar projects to get a tax break on the property tax of whatever they're investing in. Again, you can see who supported that and who opposed it. The House Bill 4057, called spray sprinkler bodies, was an effort to include sprinklers in the energy efficient standards. And this, as you can see, it passed local support. Not surprisingly, the same two characters, the local nays among the same characters. House Bill 4059 was more of a procedural bill than a substantive bill, but it modified House Bill 2021, which was passed last year. House Bill 2021, if you're following what's happening in the legislature, was the sort of standard bearer bill from 2020 that established a clean energy requirement for Oregon's residential electricity production. So that will be totally clean by 2040. It just corrected some labor standard issues. And again, the supporters and opposers in the Southern Oregon area. House Bill 4061 was a kind of strange bill. We included it here because water is probably the top issue of importance to folks in who are looking at the consequences of climate change. And one of the problems we have in Jackson, Josephine County, is a lot of hemp growers who are abusing water. And what this bill does is allow the water master, who is the county individual who is responsible for enforcing water regs, it allows that individual to petition a judge to get a warrant to go onto the land of potential scofflaws who are abusing the water. Previously, although that individual had the duty of monitoring regulations and enforcing them, he could never go onto land if the landowner didn't allow him to enter the land. So this bill, which passed, allows the water master to get a warrant to enter property. Now, I don't know whether he's going to have the guts to do that, because a lot of the hemp people are a little aggressive. House Bill 4139, that hemp thing passed without any opposition. There were a few people who were absent, but there was nobody who actually had voted against it. 4139, the House bill. This was a bill that addresses transportation, but what it does is establish a pilot project in which they're going to look into ways to manufacture construction materials which are much less polluting than the old-fashioned way. There were a couple of bills that we were following concerning diesel, 4090 and 4141, and we were following them. We did not adopt a position for or against these. These bills died in committee. Financial and tax issues, I'll run by quickly. There were a couple of bills introduced that dealt with campaign finance reform, putting limits on the amount of money that candidates can get or individuals can give to candidates. This was, Oregon is one of, I think it's 3 or 4 states that has no limits on campaign contribution whatsoever. These 2 bills, which, as you can see, we supported, both died in committee. 4055 was a tax bill. It was extending, it didn't impose a new tax, but it extended what's called a privilege tax on merchantable timber harvested in Oregon, and it imposes this really small tax of 90 cents per 1,000 board feet. This was, as I said, it wasn't a new tax, it was simply an extension of one that's already in place. It's probable that during the 2023 session, there will be an effort to introduce a harvest or severance tax bill that would impose a tax on the value of timber that's harvested, potentially allocating that money to promoting carbon sequestration or supporting counties. House Bill 4115 directed the Oregon Investment Council to publish annually a complete list of the assets of Oregon taxpayer money that's invested. This is part of the divestment campaign, what ultimately the hope is to get the Oregon Investment Council actually to divest from any funding entity that promotes fossil fuels. This one, however, simply asked for a listing of all of the entities in which the state invests. It was actually opposed by the treasurer, Tobias Reed, who is a candidate for the Democratic nomination for governor, on the grounds that there are entities which they are not legally allowed to divulge. So it was supported by Rep. Marsh and Senator Golden, and you can see who the nays are. That bill died on the Senate President's desk. Some folks have described the budget as being one of the most significant efforts in Oregon this session that supported climate action. And I'll just look at these very quickly. There was a considerable amount of money invested in decarbonizing buildings and transportation, protecting people from environmental harms, and in resilient natural and working lands. And I'm now going to pass the baton to Hogan, who will take over and deal with the other 2 categories. Okay, you need to share, Hogan.
No.
Here it comes, coming. Thank you.
Got it. Okay, thanks, Alan. So as you guys can see, as we went through and prepared for the legislative session, which I think it's worth noting is in even years is only 5 weeks long. So it's a short session, very limited on what can be introduced. Each representative has 2 personal bills, And then if they're chairs of committees, the committees can. And so these are the results of Alan and I going through and then sending out to the ROCPAC group and the SOCAN group our ideas for which pieces of legislation we're going to support that we think are most impactful for climate. So my part here is natural resources and working lands. And we'll just, go through these. Senate Bill 1501 directed the State Board of Forestry to adopt a new single rule to implement private forest accountability. This was a compromise bill that grew out of timber industry and conservation groups. They were in a fight for actually several years, and then they finally struck an accord between them, realizing that they both would have spent millions and millions of dollars on ballot measures against each other in the same year that would have essentially nullified each other. And they finally came to the table and worked out this. So they both got a little bit of what they wanted. It's good for climate interests, especially when we're dealing with forest issues and drought. We get more forest protection. We get the Board of Forestry has to develop habitat management plans, which may sound like a no-brainer, but the Board of Forestry doesn't do anything unless they're directed to no matter what. So it's a good thing. And again, SOCAN and ROCPAC both supported this. SOCAN did testimony on it. This was one where, if you look at the local support, one of our typical opposition folks actually bucked her trend and was supportive of this, and again shows that it was a compromise bill. (1534). I think this one was one that many of us were excited about and really hoping that it had a chance in this short session. It would have established state policy to increase carbon sequestration in our natural lands and waters. It should be working lands, and came out of the Oregon Global Warming Commission's Natural and Working Lands proposal. Unfortunately, it died in Ways and Means after lots of testimony by folks. It had a lot of public support, but it was identified as a climate bill by those who were opposed to climate bills, and they stepped in and pressured folks. And what I've heard from, well, if you were in Pam Marsh's town hall last week, she talked about how that Senate Bill 1501 kind of swamped a lot of the other natural and working lands bills. So this one was unfortunately collateral damage to that, I think. Hello? Doesn't want to move forward. There we go. SB 1546 established the Elliott State Forest as a research forest. That's just a great move because it now allows researchers to get in there and actually, we know that research presence is one of the most important things for preserving areas. So makes Elliott State Forest even more secure when it was going to be, just 2 years ago, it was going to be sold to private foresters. HB 4055 was one that we actually opposed, right, Alan? No, we supported this one. Sorry, that was a different one. This extended privilege taxes on the forest products, and it passed. And again, the same sort of typical characters. This one I put as kind of a crossover, Senate Bill 1533. It actually is a part of the extension from Senator Golden's SB 762 from last year, which was about wildfire mitigation and recovery, but it included some environmental justice components, recognizing the tribes in Oregon to be eligible for clean air shelters, smoke filtration systems, and things like that, as well as adding to that Senate Bill 762. So another one that we supported that passed, good to see. The bills in social and environmental justice, and this is our last section for the legislation. SB 1537. This is the one that we opposed because it's a really common tactic to prevent rules from taking place by requiring an assessment, and it just kicks the can down the road and allows opposition to build. This is, we need to look at things like housing cost impact statements and issues like that when we're talking about environmental justice. So it died in committee, so we were not sad about that at all. HB 4002. This was probably the most high-profile bill of the session. SOCAN and ROCPAC supported it. We both groups put in testimony, and this is the one that actually prohibits employers from working agricultural workers in excess of 40 hours a week. It passed, but it passed with some amendments, so it won't be an immediate change. It'll be kind of worked in over time with a lot of state support for local farms to help them kind of supplement having to pay workers extra money from what they have. So ended up, I think, being a pretty good bill. HB 4058. This one was the air conditioner and air purifiers for emergency issues. This was our own Representative Pam Marsh's proposal. And it really just was targeted at, let's make sure that we don't have, if we have the kind of heat waves that we had last summer, that we don't have 100+ people in Oregon die from heat exposure. And unfortunately it died in Ways and Means, but it was kind of wrapped together with a Senate bill that took care of that as well. So we got some progress there, I guess is the way to put that. HB 4077, rename the Environmental Justice Task Force as the Environmental Justice Council. That may seem kind of like it's just semantics, but the fact that it's a council actually gives it a little more power and a little more longevity, a little more permanence. So it was a good one to get passed. Relatively simple bill. Continuing resolution, House Continuing Resolution 203 declared a legislative intent to address risk to workers due to climate change impacts. This is one of those that is a continuing resolution that's intent, but for some reason the speaker got enough pushback that he killed it at his desk. So those are our legislative bills that we opposed. Only one of those really, and the others we supported did fairly well overall. And now we're open to questions about that.
Okay, we have a question from Ro. This concerns the investment transparency bill. Bottom line. Okay, I'll try. As you know, this is very small. I'm going to.
Okay, I'll read it.
Kathy's going to do it.
The bill which did not pass the Senate, which was preparing the way for future control of divesting from fossil fuels, should we think worse of the candidate for governor who opposed it? Who is funding him?
I don't have an answer to that question. I'm making my own judgment on that one, but SOCAN as a 501c3 cannot make recommendations regarding endorsements or not of candidates. That's why ROCPAC is in the picture. So I'll pass that to Hogan.
And I'll cover up the SOCAN on my shirt for this one. So Tobias Reed is the candidate who opposed that bill. And I don't know if it's so much, I've looked through his financial transactions, and it's not so much who's funding him now. It's the fact that he has been state treasurer for, I think, 7 years. And it's more the investments that he made while he was state treasurer. He got Oregon to be in the black very well, but part of the way he did that was by investing in fossil fuel companies and their subsidiaries. And he knows that if that bill had passed and there was a lot of kind of backlash about the transparency component, that would really dominate the campaign.
So on that same question, what are the kinds of investing agencies that cannot be reported?
My recollection is it's something about equity, but I never did understand what it was, and I didn't look into it. Maybe Meg was nodding her head. Maybe Meg knows.
No, I asked the question.
Oh, okay.
I wish we had a really clear answer for you, Meg. It was an interesting response, I think, because it was never very clear. And I think it's not a dishonest response. I think that there is a lot of legalese involved that makes it difficult to just have that kind of transparency. But I think that that's the part that we have to work through, because it's Oregon taxpayer money and we should have transparency on where it's being invested. And so I think the answer there is it was easy to kind of hide behind the legalese and those issues in that case.
I would have liked to see him come up with a counter proposal. In fact, I think there was an amendment to the bill which would have excluded those entities that were legally not allowed to be revealed. And he, as I recall, he never discussed that.
Okay, going on to other questions, Kelly has offered the comment that it does take a number of years for most bills to succeed.
That's a very good point. What often happens, and I think this is particularly the case for the short section, when Hogan and I were talking to our local legislators, one of the points that was made several times was, well, we're going to introduce such and such and such and such a bill during the short session just to get people familiar with the idea, and then we'll really plan to bring that back during the 2023 long session. So, and that's entirely consistent with that point.
Dale asked if you can say a bit more about Senate Bill 1526 with the limits on campaign contributions. Why did it die in committee?
The truth is, we rarely know why bills die in committee. It's usually because there is some pressure being brought to bear on the committee members to not push it forward, or particularly to the chair of the committee, because the chairs of these committees have a tremendous amount of authority over what actually gets voted on and what doesn't. So unless you actually attend the work sessions, and I'm not even sure we are allowed to attend work sessions, but we might be, and listen to the debate that's going on, you wouldn't necessarily know. In many cases, bills are killed as part of the horse trading. We have a strong suspicion that 1534, the Natural and Working Lands, was actually sacrificed in order to get the labor bill passed with about overtime, but we're not sure about that.
And I would add there, just really quickly about any campaign finance legislation. There are only a few legislators who really want campaign finance reform. Some of them think it's a good idea. Some of them think it's a fine idea, but Senator Golden is one of the few who actually really actively wants reform, because they all have the potential of benefiting from a Phil Knight who takes a shine to them and throws, X number of dollars their way, and now they can just cruise to victory. So the thing that I kind of take as a take-home lesson is that if Oregonians really want, and this is again my ROCPAC hat, if Oregonians really want campaign finance reform, it's going to have to come through a ballot measure effort.
And indeed, that's what Jeff Golden's bill was trying to do, actually was giving it to the Oregonians to vote on. The benefit of having a proposal pass through the legislature is then folks don't have to go out and collect the 116,000 signatures to get something on the ballot. If the legislature passes a bill assigning an idea to the ballot, we don't have to collect signatures.
Yes, but unfortunately, sometimes you have to do what you don't want to do.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, we have to take meetings with certain legislators every year.
Okay, we're on to the second part of the entertainment for this evening. I'm going to kick it off. We're looking now at the Oregon Climate Action Plan. This was a name that was given to whatever comes out of Governor Brown's Executive Order 2004, signed on March the 10th, 2020. And that executive order assigned to the state agencies the charge of developing programs that would reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the state of Oregon to 80% below 1990 levels by 2050, and promote carbon sequestration in our natural working lands, and do all of this through the lens of social justice. So we're going to look at a few of the items here. I'm going to start the ball rolling with the natural and working lands component. The Oregon Global Warming Commission established goals for carbon sequestration in the Natural and Working Lands Plan that it developed of 5 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2030 and 9.5 by 2050. This was separate from any other greenhouse gas emissions target. And this was what Senate Bill 1534, which we talked about earlier, really started off. It didn't incorporate these, I don't think it incorporated these amounts, but it said that carbon sequestration was a goal for Oregon and its natural and working lands. The Board of Forestry approved a climate change and carbon plan that acknowledged climate change is happening, and develops ways to promote carbon sequestration. The Oregon Department of Forestry incorporated carbon and climate goals into the Western Oregon State Forest Management Plan, and SOCAN was engaged with and testified to Oregon Global Warming Commission and the Oregon Department of Forestry and the Board of Forestry throughout the development of these activities. In the arena of transportation, the Environmental Quality Commission adopted a clean truck rule, which actually came to us straight from California. And what this does is promote electric trucks in Oregon. In fact, it requires that a certain percentage of trucks sold in Oregon should be electric trucks. The Oregon Department of Transportation completed what it called TINA, the Transportation Electrification Needs Analysis, and that was designed to look into what Oregon needs if we're going to promote electrification in our transportation. And a particular area of relevance here is expanding charging stations across the state. And again, SOCAN engaged on these issues throughout the discussions. In the arena of clean energy, the Public Utilities Commission prioritize decarbonization of the utility sector. That's the utility sector is the sector that generates electricity whether by coal or natural gas or renewable energy. They also improved the Oregon Community Solar Program to serve low-income Oregonians by allowing a discount for such subscribers. They adopted policies to keep power available to vulnerable Oregonians facing pandemic hardships, and they developed distribution system proposals. They historically control the utilities, and what the Public Utilities Commission is apparently doing is becoming much more engaged in supervising the utilities. One of the things that's currently happening is a discussion within the PUC of the future of natural gas in Oregon. And one of the things most of us are arguing in the climate arena is there should be absolutely no future for methane in Oregon. And that's what the natural gas fact-finding item here is all about. We testified on many of these issues. Okay, I think I'm now handing over to Hogan.
Okay. Oops, I got to fast forward. Sorry, guys. Okay, cap and reduce. This is the best that has come out of our previous cap and trade plan. The Department of Environmental Quality, so DEQ and Environmental Quality Commission, EQC, made a major step, I think, strengthened by the literally thousands of comments and the advocates by establishing a climate protection program. So that sets things like mandatory science-based emission limits on oil companies and fossil gas utilities. So you can see the numbers there that the targets are supposed to hit. Science-based targets for industrial facilities. They haven't set targets for those because there needs to be some more work done there. And that climate protection program allows for investment in clean energy projects focused on environmental justice communities. So communities that are traditionally marginalized, which includes rural communities throughout Oregon. And let me just take a quick second to say, when Alan says SOCAN was active, he is very much underselling his own activity. I wish we had like one of those, like your step counter. We need a Zoom counter for Alan on Ocap meetings. And the amount of time that he spends in those. Just seriously marathon man there. And it pays off. So SOCAN and ROCPAC testified, initiated action, and joined efforts to strengthen the climate protection program. We really went to bat with this one. There were over 7,000 comments that came in about the CPP. 70% of those were in favor of strengthening it, making sure that we had investments for those communities. There's the potential up to $500 million invested annually in environmental justice and vulnerable communities through the community climate investment. What that is companies that know that they're not going to make those emissions, the entities that aren't going to make those emissions, they can invest in that, and they can pay. They still have to get to those emissions, but if, let's say, in 1 year they're not going to make those goals, they can invest in that. Okay, clean buildings. Oregon and Department of Energy, ODOE, Public Utility Commission again, the Building Codes Division. They got some work done. So hopefully you guys are seeing that there's a pattern here. Some of the agencies did a lot of work. A lot of it was pushed by the statewide coalition. Some of the communities did a little bit of work. Some of the agencies, I mean. And so ODOE set new energy efficiency standards. The legislature approving heat pumps comes into play here. Again, we worked with coalition partners to work on this. This potentially saves us up to $100 million and 100,000 metric tons per year by 2035. But there's a lot more work to do on clean buildings. And that's part of that REACH codes task force that Alan started the whole thing off with. Public health, Hogan Health Authority has a lot to do here. Unfortunately, COVID made it really difficult for the Oregon Health Authority to deal with really anything that wasn't directly COVID related. And so they and OSHA have recognized the amount that's lost annually from excessive heat issues, the amount average cost of heat related hospitalizations. So they set up data collecting to figure those things out. But this is one that really over the next several years needs a lot of work. We really need to push for some of these issues. You know, we have a continually aging population in Oregon that, except for a few places, isn't getting any younger. And these are real issues for folks that need to be dealt with. All right. So then the Department of Land Conservation and Development also set up a new category, climate friendly and equitable communities. And so this is focused on strengthening administrative rules that will deal with Oregon's 8 urban areas. Being a longtime Oregon resident, I often joke that we only have one real urban area, but we won't go into that issue right now. Albany, Bend, Corvallis, then Eugene, Springfield, Grants Pass, Medford, Ashland, Portland, Salem, Kaiser. I'm sure my friends in Grants Pass would love to know that they're urbanites. This is about reducing pollution while also increasing housing choices, getting more equitable outcomes, and at the same time, reducing the emphasis on motor vehicle mobility and looking more at, can we provide access to services in different ways? So this is where a lot of the public transport work is coming in, and a lot of dollars will be shifted towards there. Questions? We're a little
Sorry,
ahead of
Hogan.
time, so
Yeah, we're doing good, and that's good because we've got some questions in here. Do committees have a transcript of their meetings?
yes.
How do we find it?
You usually, are we going back to the legislature?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a past legislature question.
They
Go ahead, Alan.
probably videos of the work sessions that are available. But unfortunately, because of where we live, I can't watch them. It's a broadband problem.
So
And
they are available, but you have to, I mean, do they have the records of them? So, because we were talking about
Yeah.
committees not not knowing why certain bills were killed. Is that recorded?
Yes, I think that we're recorded, and you can, and I can talk you through it. If you go to the Oregon Legislative Information Systems Services website, you can go through to the committee and find out on what day a work session was held to consider what bill, and you could probably watch the video of that. Hogan,
But
any thoughts?
let me also just say that they're also required to keep transcripts of those meetings. So there is a written record, but a lot of these bills are not killed during a work session. A lot of these bills are killed during meetings between legislators in closed doors that don't have a recording.
Mhm.
It's like making sausage, you know, you don't want people to always see what goes into the sausage, and you don't want them to see what always goes into negotiating laws. And that's the perspective of many legislators, let's put it that way. I think that we need to push for more transparency and things being done during committee, but you know, there's always going to be kind of, as my dad would have said, there's always going to be horse trading. There's always going to be, you know, we really want to get the overtime law passed. Well, then you guys have to let something die. And that those conversations often happen outside of committee. So.
Okay, next question is from Karen. When does the 2023 session begin? And what's the best way to follow which ideas will actually make it to bill status?
As Kathy was trying to find this very piece of information, and apparently the OLIS hasn't posted yet the dates for the 2023 session. But if we are considering past practice, we can pretty much count on the session starting probably the first Tuesday in February and then running through the end of June, something like that. The way to try and keep up with what's happening that's climate related is to keep in touch with the coalition, the statewide coalition of climate activists, and the leaders are Renew Oregon, Climate Solutions, Oregon Environmental Council, Oregon League of Conservation Voters, and keep in touch with them and attend their meetings, because their statewide meetings, because that's when these things are going to get discussed. And then as we go through fall, there will be several what are called legislative days when issues are being discussed. And when the bills are finally go through their legislative concept stage developed by the Legislative Council, they are filed prior to the session. Those bills are then listed on the OLIS site, and it's possible to go through them. And this is exactly what Hogan and I did back at the beginning of the session. And that's when we went through and made our recommendations to SOCAN's federal and state group and to ROCPAC on what should be the bills of interest and concern. Oh, and Kathy reminded me, if anybody is interested in the legislative arena, you're more than welcome to come to our federal and state committee meetings. They're always held on the second Monday of the month from 2 to 3 or 3:30. Just contact me and I'll make sure you get on the list.
Okay, we've got a few more questions in just a couple minutes. So Kelly has put a note in here. She's part of, is it ORNOW Legislative Task Force? And they made a webinar in 2021 that's an introduction to OLIS and the Oregon legislative process as a way to skill build and increasing our effectiveness as individuals. And so she's interested in collaborating with anybody and sharing that information. And we can connect with you and include it on the website. But if you have a link to that and could put that in the chat, that would also be helpful. Going to Ray, question about electric trucks. Who might pay for charging stations, their electricity to charge, and will there be delays in truck transport, hence higher costs elsewhere?
That bill involves a phase-in of the requirements, so it's not instantly that starting next year. I think the number is 10%. 10% of the trucks sold in Oregon have to be electric trucks. But I don't hold me to that percentage, but it's going to phase in slowly. So gradually this will happen. And I don't have an answer to the question, who is going to pay for the charging stations, but we do as you heard, there is a lot of concern about the need for the state to stimulate charging stations. Indeed, one of the areas that might be funded by the Community Investment Fund that Hogan was talking about in connection with the cap and reduce program, the climate protection program, one of the areas of that for investing there might well be that people can get, polluters can get credit for investing in the installation of charging stations.
Mary Ann has a question about housing alternatives such as tiny houses. Is that part of anything that's being discussed?
There was a lot of legislation outside of the bills that we focused on, and we did not. In fact, a lot of bills came through actually after we had gone through the list. Housing was, although it's a critically important issue, of course, was not one that we were focusing on when we were determining what bills we were going to follow. But there were some housing bills out there. And if somebody wants to go through and check these out, if you get in touch with me, I can tell you how to go to OLIS and look through the bill list, and you can do a word search on house and see how many housing bills there were and what happened to them.
Question about the funds that will be coming in as part of the federal infrastructure funds. How will we keep track of how that $4+ billion will be spent? We'll go for EV chargers from Flavia.
Do you want to take that, Hogan? I've talked to it a lot. I'll throw you the one I can't answer.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Let me jump back really quickly about upcoming the long session. If anyone has specific ideas for legislation they'd like to see get introduced, that's part of what ROCPAC exists for. So you can email me. I'll put it in the chat. It's just hogan@rocpac.org. And we can have that discussion and talk about how we take that to the local legislators and present it to them. Okay. So I just want to throw that out there. As far as, and Flavia, I should have known that you would ask that question and make it difficult. As far as those funds coming in, part of that money that Alan talked about that were the investments in climate issues, part of that money is coming from that $4 billion coming into the state that's getting parceled out to different counties and different areas. And really it's the legislature is really handling most of that. And so, I mean, the reality is it's following them closely and asking your local legislator, and this would be for those of you living in Medford District 6, this would be a great topic to fill up Kim Wallen's email inbox with, is how are those funds being allocated and what are you doing to help make sure that they're addressing climate issues and the issues we have here in your district, because I don't think she's been very active. Pam Marsh has a really good handle on a lot of it. So you could definitely reach out to her office and they will point you in the right directions. But it would be way too big of a program to get into the federal funding and how that gets filtered down through everything for us to do here. So
a question about OCAP from Estelle. Are OCAP efforts and accomplishments thus far in jeopardy depending on who becomes the next governor?
Easy answer, yes. Thank you for bringing it up, Estelle. Absolutely. The next governor can do just like we see the presidents do, where they just wipe out executive orders. And so that's why some of these things have been like the clean energy efforts and some of the legislation that's getting passed. And this next session is probably going to be a really important one for codifying some of these things.
Yes, interestingly, when Hogan and I were driving back from the signing of the executive order, one of the points that we were agreeing on was how critical it is that once the agencies develop their programs to achieve the governor's goals, that those be codified into statute, because if they're not, as Hogan said, an executive order is only effective as long as there is a governor who is willing to maintain that executive order in effect.
So I think we've gotten most of the questions. I know we didn't get at Dale's question about the history, but we're going to spend the last few minutes going through different activities that are happening. And then I think both of our speakers can stay with us for a few minutes if you want to hang on for a little bit, and we can try to pick up anything we've missed.
Sure can.
So what we've done is we've put links to different things. You go to socan.eco/action and you see this, and under collective action, there's one for the legislative session and one for the OCAP. And so we've tried to put ideas there and links to some of the things you've been asking about. What I'm going to share next are SOCAN activities and other organizations. Everything I talk about is at socan.eco/events. So if I go by too quickly, you can go there and pick up the details. Oftentimes people learn about these meetings and other meetings, like when the government group meets, from the SOCAN broadcast and SOCAN reminder. Those go out twice a month. And if you want to sign up for those, if you're not getting them, if you go to socan.eco, and on the right side under the rotating image is this area here where you can sign up. And you can always unsubscribe if you decide that you don't want to get them. I'd like to announce, you're the first group of people to know this. SOCAN is turning 10 in September. 10 years ago, SOCAN brought climate consciousness to Southern Oregon, and we're inviting people to join us to celebrate a decade of grassroots climate advocacy, as well as looking at SOCAN yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So mark your calendars, September 17th at 5 p.m., and we'll get details out in the coming months, but it'll be held at the Hilton Garden Inn in Medford. Oops. SOCAN has 5 different programs and then projects under these. I'm going to go through this quickly because all these events are on the calendar if you want to look at them. The County City Project, which is part of the government program, meets Thursday, April 28th. That's the group that represents the different cities that are currently working on helping their community become more aware of climate change and actions. Specifically, the Medford Action Team is going to meet on Friday, April 1st. That's a Zoom meeting. And the Jacksonville Action Team will meet on Monday, April 11th, and that's at the Jacksonville Public Library. The federal and state project, as Alan mentioned before, is going to meet its next meeting on Monday, April 11th from 2 to 3:30. That's a Zoom meeting, and the link is on the calendar. Under the Natural Resources Program, the Forest and Fire Project meets Wednesday, April 20th from 2:30 to 3:30, and that's a Zoom meeting. And we have partial details from Coastal SOCAN. This is part of the Community Engagement Program. They have been selected as one of the groups that gets to watch the pre-release screening of the Revolution Generation. We don't have the date yet for sure, but that will be on the calendar, and it'll be also in the monthly broadcast when that comes out the 1st of next month. SOCAN's next monthly meeting, always the last Tuesday of the month, will be on promoting net carbon accounting and soil health in the Pacific Northwest. We have quite a few people interested in regenerative agriculture from the perspective of doing it yourself to the perspective of making it happen on a much larger scale. And we're very fortunate to have, I'm going to call him Dr. Mike. Don't tell him I didn't pronounce his last name.
I'm going to have a crack at it. I'm guessing that's Bezmirovsky.
Thank you. From the Oregon Department of Agriculture Soil. He's a soil and health specialist, and he's going to be talking about some grants that are being written to bring some of this money to Oregon. And so we encourage you, as well as any people in agriculture who might be interested, to join us for that presentation. SOCAN Master Climate Protector is reaching the end of this year's course. It starts again February 2023, and we will have information out. People who sign up will get notices once we start planning for the 2023 course. These are other program projects that don't have current meetings, but all of this is on the website. On the front page, you can click on any of these and find out who's leading any of the projects and how to connect with them. Earth Day is going to happen in person this year. We're very excited. There are several activities happening. We are going to be involved in the SOU Earth Day extravaganza. We'll have a booth there, and that's going to be Friday, April 22nd from 3:30 to 6:30 at the farm at SOU. And we're also going to be involved in the Community Earth Day celebration that is going to be held at the Temple MX Shalom and Grace Point Church parking area. And so we invite you to join us there or to volunteer to help, either in preparing the booth or being at the actual event and helping talk to people for the Earth Day events. Want to quickly comment on some other activities that are happening that we're aware of. Regenerative gardening, how to grow a sustainable garden with living soil. Rihanna Sims is doing this. She's done a presentation for us and is an excellent speaker. This is put on by the Talent Garden Club, and it's on Saturday, April 2nd. I have linked to their events. So if you go to SOCAN Facebook page events, then you'll see the details there. Southern Oregon Food Solutions, everybody eats, feed people, not the landfills. They are having Food Waste Prevention Week, or participating in that, April 4th to 8th. And the link to that information is on the bottom. Southern Oregon Citizens Climate Lobby has their monthly meeting on April 9th at 10 a.m. Being held at Pony Espresso in Ashland, and will be held in person. And ROCPAC, as Hogan has been representing, is Rural Oregon's Voice on Climate Action, and their website is there. If you're interested in connecting with them, we encourage you to do so. So a big thanks to Hogan and Alan for sharing, and also being with all those legislative sessions and the Ocap meetings for so many hours. Thanks to you for joining us. This is really important information for all of us to know about. But if it stops with you, that's nice, but not good enough. We need action. So we encourage you to write your elected officials. You saw how they voted on these things. Tell them if you agree or not. And if you want to go back and review any of the information, this has been recorded and we'll have it posted shortly. But if you go to that page with the actions on it, you'll get a lot of the information there. The summaries of that is included on the action page. So finally, a survey was sent to you a little while ago on email, and we really appreciate any input you can give us. It's always helpful to know what it's like from your side and if you're getting the information you want. SOCAN's website and questions are there. If you're able to support SOCAN financially, we do appreciate any help that we can get. That's what keeps us going. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording, and